How you doing? Live stream. 15 minutes before Dark Secret Place here in my studio. How's everyone doing? I'm going to play the audio of the Marines are advertising on the Super Bowl for the first time in 30 years. But it's not the Super Bowl. It's going to be streaming Super Bowl. So we'll talk about that. Getting a battery in here. Let me see. Come on, battery. Come on, you fucking battery. There we go. Yeah, so, and I'll talk about Russia and Syria. Now that ISIS is gone, the Russians are really doubling down in Syria. And by the way, this isn't just a hat. This is the honey do your chores hat for husbands. See, it has retractable earplugs right there. Little pockets with those right in there. I did not listen to the Super Bowl in the first Gulf War. I guess that was the Whitney Houston Super Bowl. We watched it on a big outdoor big screen. In Bosnia, same deal. We watched it, at 3 a.m. And then in Iraq, we watched the Super Bowl. What was so funny was that First Cav had this stupid rule where like they had this, well, every soldier will get issued 2 beers. And my my company executive officer was a Mormon, and he had not registered. And I said, you stupid motherfucker, go get me 2 more beers. But the thing is, my unit, we regularly basically wrote our own patrols, and we had come up with a survey operation where we went to local liquor stores, which were Christian owned. So we were visiting liquor stores like every other day. We had our own beer. We just went out and bought Heineken, and we would bring it back on the fob. We had another unit do something really stupid where they asked their translators to bring alcohol onto the fob. Well, non-tactical vehicles are searched on their way, onto an American fob, and so they got a translator fired and they got in trouble. It was really, really stupid. We would go to liquor stores, and I would talk to the liquor store owner and say, "Are you getting death threats? How is your business doing?" And then meanwhile, my men would be buying, Heineken and, and all this other stuff. So we had a pretty ample, regular supply of beer. And the reason I did that, the reason I took the chance and did that was because all of my men, except myself and my gunner, were married with kids. And the deal is they were all prior regular Army, very responsible guys. And I just had one rule, and the rule was, don't ever put me in a position where I have to lie. When you guys go off duty at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., I don't want to see you. You know, if you're drinking, I don't want to see it in the can. You know, be smart. If you're ever asked, then you have to take responsibility and don't rat out anyone else. You know, it's really that simple. So I never ever had any problem. My guys were always ready at 5 a.m. They were never hungover, you know, or whatever. And I told them, just don't ever make it an issue. And I trusted them. I treated them like adult men, and they responded like men. You know, that's like in my experience, like in Bosnia and Desert Storm, especially in Bosnia, when you tell American soldiers that they can't have access to something that other NATO soldiers have access to, and that is a beer during dinner, then the American soldiers will get in trouble going after that beer. And it just is really, it's needless, you know, and that if you, you know, if you give them a little, they're not going to ask for a whole lot. So my guys never, ever got me in trouble, and they never got themselves in trouble. So that's how I did it, and that's what having prior experience deploying did. So there's that. So anyway. So yeah, we're going to talk about the Russians. The Russians lost a Su-25, NATO codename Frogfoot, today. So we'll talk about that. Thank you very much, Entropy. Yeah, the live show in Orange was a lot of fun. About 130 people at Dave & Buster's in Orange for my show, which we call How to Hide Your Guns from Gavin Newsom. And I think there's a Dave & Buster's going up in the West Valley, I want to say, in Thousand Oaks or Cala Blackless. And oops. So we'll look at that. Let's see. By the way, I just saw on KCAL there was a thing about this company, Black Rifle Coffee. These guys who do the T-shirts, they branched out into coffee. And I tried contacting him because I was interested in like maybe having them advertise on Dark Secret Place, and even doing like a custom coffee. And then I found that there's a custom roaster in Pasadena. And so I'm talking with this guy about doing a dark roast secret place. Get it? And doing a run of like 1,000 pounds in 1 pound bags. And then I would mail them directly. And we would definitely, like on Patreon, if you go to Patreon, Dark Secret Place, Patreon, you can help me build out this YouTube channel with our equipment and our sets and things like that. And if you're a $25 Big Kahuna contributor, then I'll mail you a pound of coffee every month. And then we'll do better and better videos, you know, and things like that. So, because I've got a lot of wacky friends, and we'll do funny videos too, and all that shit. But mainly it'll be the Dark Secret Place channel, including the live stuff and things like that. But so anyway, no, Dark Roast Secret Place, Dark Roast, not Dark Secret Roast, Dark Roast Secret Place. And so I know you are. Thank you very much,
bug you, but I was reading a
Jolene.
review.
Oh, Michael Chapé.
About problems with that kind of makes it not advantageous for me.
Yeah, Michael Chapé and I are talking about alarm systems. Yeah, I've heard that if you're out of the house for a long time, that's the best fit, I guess.
This guy sounds like he's saying that you can't just turn on the camera any old time you want and take a look. It's like somebody has to trigger it, and if you have to get there in time, or you were locked out. I was like, what?
Oh, I hadn't heard that. Um, so yeah, because I'm a big fan of dark roast coffee, and and it would the more the better. If you do a run, the more the better. So that would be fun, and we would use the logo, the Dark Secret Place logo, and that would be what we would do, and it would be Dark Roast Secret Place or Dark Secret Place Roast or whatever. But yeah, like I say, Kennedy's brother, Kennedy on Fox. By the way, I'm on Fox Business on Monday with Kennedy. Her brother was a cop in Portland, Oregon, and now he is a representative for a company, a knife company, and he knows some of these guys. He introduced me to them about a year ago because they were pimping their self-funded movie. They did this movie called Area 51, and it was shitty. It was really, really, really shitty, but they self-funded it, and they were taking it around the country. And when they were in L.A., I tried to get them in the studio, and it's like, this is free publicity, dude. And they never got back in touch with me. So they're all prior Rangers, Army Rangers, and stuff like that. But there's not not a lot of media savvy in that company. They would go a long way if they asked me for some free advice, and it would be free. But also, I should point out to all of you that are watching me on YouTube.
That's a good show, man.
No, you have a good show.
I'll try on the way home.
I'm talking to Josh right there.
I'll text you when I get your stuff tomorrow.
And so the main takeaway here is that Dark Secret Place from 10 p.m. to midnight in LA radio. In LA radio on Saturday nights, music rules, right? I used to produce K-Rock Night at the Palace. Me and Kennedy did. And basically, we went to the Hollywood Palace at 8 p.m. and we turned a fucking switch up. And K-Rock broadcast the house music from the Palace, and we were number one. And we thought, oh man, we're number one. We're programming geniuses. Well, it turns out that music is for 20 years has been the ruler of Saturday nights. Well, for the first time, this has gone on about a year. I just found out. For the first time in about 20 years, Dark Secret Place is the number one show in Los Angeles from 10 p.m. to midnight. KFI is number one on Saturday night at 10 p.m. 10 p.m. to midnight, a guy in a dark room with no producer, not taking phone calls, is the number one show in Los Angeles. And then I should just say that we're first place. The shows that precede me, my lead-in as it is they're not close. They're not even close. I'm not going to complain though because I'm number one. So anyway, on KFI, keep in mind that on KFI, if you played a hog calling contest, you should not drop out of the top 10. There's no way KFI in any day part, as we say, should be out of the top 10. George Norrie rules overnights. Weekends here on KFI, the reason that the boss has air staff do live shows on the weekend is because just in case there's breaking news, and also because, we don't have to sit there and sell like KABC does, their entire weekend. You hear nothing but infomercials and boner pills and shit like that. But so with live human beings in studio, we should never drop out of top 10, ever. I mean, ever. But there are certain times when we do. Also, Sundays, Super Hyper Local Sunday, I took over last May, and that part, 8 to 10 p.m., had never cracked the top 10 for years. Sunday night KFI had never cracked the top 10. 2 ratings books later, I have it at number 3 with momentum. So in the next ratings book, I'll probably overtake music on Sunday night. So that is Super Hyperlocal Sunday. So turns out I can do talk radio here and there.
Well, now another review says that it does allow you to do that. So I'm confused.
I'll have to reread that at Costco. I thought I read that you could at any time, like you know, like you could have a dog camera. You could turn on your Ring doorbell.
Yeah, because this guy's semi-negative was a year, 2 years ago, 2016, and this woman's is 17 days ago.
Oh. All right, I have to get serious about this.
American Vision windows will make your home gorgeous, keep it cooler and quieter, and save you money on electricity. And right now you can upgrade to the...
Did everyone see the plaque that dude made for me? A guy came up. This guy came up from San Diego. He's a professional woodworker, and he made this beautiful plaque for me, and just gave it to me. So I gave him a dozen eggs, and I pinned it on Twitter.
Security?
Yep, all good. And anyway, really nice, really nice, beautiful plaque, and I put it on, the pin tweet. I'll put it up on Facebook. There's our time.
And then tomorrow, sunny skies, maybe a few more clouds for the afternoon. It'll be partly sunny highs, low to mid-70s for the beaches, 70s to mid-80s for the metro areas, and also for the valleys of the IE tomorrow. And then mostly sunny, a little bit cooler by
Okay, I have to play the intro. Here we go.
Tuesday, 60s at the coast, of the 70s to near 80 for the inland areas.
I'll try to remember to keep the mic off when I'm playing sound on my computer. Right here.
Doug's secret place.
This radioactivity is coming from
Brian Suits on KFI.
Yeah, the YouTube analytics are pretty amazing. Actually, YouTube is going to give me a drone. They're gonna have me learn how to use it to incorporate it in a video. They're going to give me a drone. All right, let's do a radio show. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here until midnight live on Los Angeles' #1 Saturday night show. I should say, of all shows, by the way, never mind dance music. I was going to say a talk show. No, we're just the #1 show. So thanks to all of you, and also thanks to everyone who came out to Hollywood Wednesday night for my live show at Dave & Buster's. Great time. And then Dave & Buster's at Orange on Thursday night. We had north of 130 people, all good tippers. A terrific time there at the Dave & Buster's in Orange. And if you checked did I pin the tweet? Anyway, a guy came up from San Diego, and he made this beautiful plaque with my name and rank, and out of this very I guess not rare, but this wood I'd never heard of before. And he made it on a computer-controlled engraving machine, and just beautifully detailed. And he had the U.S. Army seal and the U.S. Army National Guard seal, and then he engraved into the wood a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart. And then my two favorite sayings across the top and the bottom: "Hope is not a plan, and the enemy gets a vote." And so I have it on Facebook at Dark Secret Place and Twitter. And if you like it, there's a link to the guy's business. He's a Navy veteran down there in San Diego, and he drove all the way up to Orange just to give me this thing. It was amazing. So if you like it and you want one like it, get in touch with the guy, because it was my daughter. Thing weighs like 8 pounds. So I took a picture of my daughter holding it. She could barely hold it. But anyway, what a day in Syria. Lines have been drawn, and they're getting more and more clear in what was sort of a fuzzy conflict. Now that Al-Qaeda now that ISIS is effectively an afterthought, The American media have left. You're not seeing on Friday, Syria did not come up on the news once. And we have 8,000 troops in Syria in contact with what's left of ISIS, also fighting whoever comes at them, Al-Qaeda or whatever. And now with the Turkish army threatening to, now that they've invaded, to turn east and go to Iraq, in their words. And so but there was nothing in the news about it. Well, today, which is tomorrow in Syria, today was, there was sort of a big event today, and that is the regime is still fighting the Free Syrian Army in the Idlib province. Meanwhile, the Turks have invaded to fight the Kurds and it's sort of an away game for both sides, I guess you could say, because the Kurds generally are from the eastern part of Syria, but the Turks invaded a western province of Syria near the Mediterranean to eliminate Kurds, because the Turks want this 30-mile wide buffer zone between Turkey and Syria, and they want a Kurd-free zone. So we'll get to that later on, because the Turks had kind of a big loss of troops today, a very public, embarrassing thing, at the hands of Kurdish female fighters with anti-tank missiles. But earlier today, Russia has lost. The Russian Air Force has lost several aircraft in Syria for different reasons, operational accidents, mechanical accidents, but they have not had an aircraft shot down. So today, as the Russian Air Force were providing close air support for their own forces on the ground, advising Assad's guys, the Free Syrian Army people on the ground began engaging the Russian aircraft. The Russians have an equivalent of the A-10. The Russian answer to the A-10 is an aircraft called the Su-25, the Sukhoi 25. And by all accounts, the thing is made of iron, and it is a workhorse. It first debuted in Afghanistan, and it's sort of it is their version of the A-10. It hits hard. It carries a lot of weapons underneath. It looks way different than our A-10, but the primary reason there is because it does not have that large 30-millimeter Gatling gun underneath the cockpit. It's got a smaller but also not as powerful but powerful gun. But this thing is a knife fighter. This is a low-altitude close air support platform, tried and true from Afghanistan through Chechnya, including the last 5 years in Syria. Well, today somebody brought a man-portable air defense system, or MANPADS, a shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missile, and they got a Russian Su-25. The aircraft continued on. It turned back towards the Russian base near the Mediterranean, but it didn't make it. The pilot ejected, and when he hit the ground, he ejected into the wrong crew. There was a jihadist rebel group that evidently was trying to capture the guy, and he fought back. According to the Russian story and the rebel story on the ground is that the guy fought back, and he was killed in combat. Now, the photos of the guy, his equipment has been stripped. He's in a T-shirt, and there's blood behind his head. And if you asked me, it looked like a guy had been executed. But everyone said, both sides, this is what's unusual, both sides say that the guy decided to fight it out. And by the way, keep in mind, never mind just ISIS. Of course you would fight it out with ISIS and leave the last bullet for yourself. But some of the other rebel groups on the ground in Syria are just as depraved as ISIS. They just don't have as good of a media department. Their budget for GoPro cameras, I think, is slightly smaller. But so, of course, and what really struck me about this today was that this incident was caught from 100 different angles, because the Russians were busy strafing and rocketing this city without any consideration to who's down there on the ground. Apparently, the targeting is done with a Thomas guide or a Michelin map or something. It wasn't precisely targeted. They were shooting area weapons like rockets into the city, full of men, women, and children, the whole thing. So anyway, they're flying around with impunity, and this is from the ground. And the pilots are not exhibiting any sort of they're not doing any sort of counter ground fire moves. They're not shooting flares out of the aircraft. They feel like, hey, we own the air, and there's no threats to us on the ground. Almost like it was a training exercise when this missile was fired. So this Russian aircraft is at about 5,000 feet. This is where, for instance, when the Obama administration first began committing aircraft to fight ISIS, there was a hard deck rule. Just like when Clinton had the Kosovo air war, he told American aircraft, including A-10s, not to go below 10,000 feet. And the result was a lot of accidents, a lot of misidentification of confusing a tractor for a tank, which at 10,000 feet you can do. And then that's kind of the reason the A-10 is effective, is because the pilot can fly low and slow, but tactical. So anyway, these guys are low at like 5,000 feet, but this Su-25 was hit. The Russians answered a few hours later. Now it didn't even take till the end of the day. The Russian Duma, the Russian Parliament, has stood up a committee to discover where this missile came from. And what they want to do is find a way to trace it back to the U.S. They want to be able to say that the United States is doing what we did in Afghanistan, and that we are actively fighting against them, defending their ally, Bashar Assad. I'll tell you how that's going. And I'll play you the audio of the guys actually shooting the missile and then hitting the aircraft right after this. It is a dark secret place. Brian Suits in here until midnight. KFI. AM 640, more stimulating talk. Michael Chapin with the news.
Record-setting warm out of the San Francisco Bay Area. People in the area packed beaches today with the temperature hit a record 73 degrees.
No, Ian Drury.
Set in 1992, San Jose got up to 78 degrees, 4 degrees higher than the old record there, set in 2009. Police say burglars stole $165,000 in jewelry from a room at the Beverly Hills Hotel. The room apparently belonged to actor John Stamos' fiancée. Top safe.
Am I in queue?
Last night, when at least one thief got inside and took several items of jewelry.
Got him.
All right, I got it. Let's see. Yeah, it's a 23 millimeter gun. I tweeted out video earlier today around noon of the wreckage of the Su-25, and it was like the ultimate battlefield troll. They recovered the internal cannon out of the Su-25, and at the end of this video that I tweeted out, these two guys have balanced it on a motorcycle and they're driving away with it. And I guarantee they got the gun to run. They have the gun up and running somehow, but they stripped the internal cannon off the wreckage, and somehow it survived. And
looking at that plaque, it's pretty damn impressive.
yeah, that guy, he just gave it to me. It's like a $200 plaque. But yeah, there's no video so far of the dead pilot if he was alive. Because if they killed him, and I'll talk about this in the next break. No, the Su-25 is not supersonic. Yeah, it is. It's the same weapon as a Zeus 23 or the ZPU 23. The wisdom of executing a guy like this is dubious. You know, if you had a live Russian pilot, you could get a lot for that. And you could probably at least, get a reprieve from being bombed. But the main deal is you get this guy on the ground, and you have evidence that he has been killing civilians. And what would you do? Well, if you really want a gigantic PR win, you take the evidence of dead civilians, you take all the video that you can, and you deliver the guy to The Hague. You know, the Russians would say, "Give us our pilot back," and you would say, "Meet him in The Hague," and put him on trial. The pilot was killed. According to the rebels on the ground, the pilot fought it out. You know, they're flying with a pistol, and he wanted to avoid capture, and he fought it out. And here's the other thing. In the one photograph I've seen of him, there's blood behind him on the ground. He's on his back. Keep in mind, if I were him in that same situation, I would kill myself. And so he might have taken his own life. He might have done the smart thing and killed himself. We don't know. But there is no video so far of him being executed, only video of him dead. So, and that's the thing, is he's not the guy. There's some blood and all that, but he's not peppered in bullet holes. So, yeah, you know, and that's what's funny. The A-10 is so old. The company that made it doesn't exist anymore. Fairchild. Somewhere, someone has the dies and the blueprints and all that, but the Fairchild company doesn't exist anymore. So. No, and it won't be. Oh, how much time?
1 minute.
Bumper time. I will do Out of Limits. All right, I'm all good. What is that? I wish I had a gun just like an A-10 by Dos Gringos. Never heard of that. Yeah, that's the weird thing about strafing runs, because in Nevada at Fallon, in my guard unit, we used to watch Navy F-18 strafing runs, and you see the smoke from the nose, and then you hear the impact of the bullets, and then finally you hear the actual firing from the F-18. Pretty weird. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is a dark secret place. Brian sits in here until midnight, and next hour, the Marine Corps has embargoed the Super Bowl for 30 years. They have not advertised during a Super Bowl in 30 years. Well, tomorrow, the Marine Corps will break that embargo, but only online. Because there's a very, very specific cohort, as we say, of recruits that the Marine Corps is looking for right now. They don't, you sitting there on a couch at Gary Hoffman's house, stuffing your face, that's not who the Marine Corps wants to spend money to get in front of tomorrow. They want to get in front of people who are cord cutters. And I'll play that spot next hour. Also, a Kurdish anti-tank crew taking out a Turkish tank. And the initial report was 8 to 10 dead Turkish soldiers. The Turks are admitting to 5. So anyway, earlier today, Russia lost an aircraft and a pilot over Syria. This is something that they, of course, dealt with when the Turks according to the Turks, accidentally shot down a Russian aircraft going on 2.5 years ago. And boy, have they kissed and made up ever since, huh? To the point where our NATO ally Turkey is going to buy a Russian anti-aircraft system, the S-400 system, for billions. But today, a close air support aircraft, an Su-25 of the Russian Air Force, deployed to Syria as they were working a target. By target, I mean like cluster bombing children, stuff like that. Somebody on the ground had a surface-to-air missile, and it was operable. And it turned out to be a Chinese FN-6, which is a copy of an old Soviet anti-aircraft missile. And when this is an infrared-seeking missile, so in other words, it doesn't lock. There's no active radar. The aircraft doesn't have a warning system for pardon me, for infrared, because you don't know that the enemy infrared system is locked onto you. It's passive. It's detecting infrared, whereas an active radar, has to send a signal out. So the pilot doesn't know, which is why whenever you see footage of A-10s in Afghanistan, you always see the pilots popping those flares off right before a strafing run. And as they're turning away, they pop the flares off, because that's the most vulnerable place an aircraft is. It's fired at the enemy target, and and you don't fly over the enemy target, you avoid it. You turn left or you turn right. 95% of pilots on Earth turn right. This is something that the North Vietnamese discovered in the Vietnam War, that American pilots, 95% of the time, turned right off a target. And so that's when American aircraft, by doctrine and training, begin firing off the chaff and flares. The chaff are the little metal bits. The flares distract the infrared missiles. So this Russian pilot didn't do this. And here's the sound of the guys on the ground who got him. And by the way, let me tell you beforehand, Yalla means go, go, go. Yalla, 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 yalla means go, go, go. There goes the missile. Oh, it's going faster than the Russian.
Got him. Allahu Akbar!
And then I'll just edit that out, but just take my word for it. They yelled Allahu Akbar for about 5 minutes. And so it's what they do. And, but the missile, well, the thing is, and I've explained this to people, it doesn't necessarily literally mean God is great, God is great, God is great. That chant, that expression is, if you can imagine the times that you've yelled holy S, that you're on I-5, someone hits the brakes in front of you, you stand on the brakes and you go holy S, and then or perhaps your favorite Eagles player with the clock running out catches a pass and has a free lane to the end zone, goes to the Super Bowl, and you yell holy S. There's like good holy S, and there's bad holy S. But we say that term, and it doesn't translate into Arabic. The Americans say what? They say poop from heaven. They say heaven poop for good and bad stuff. That's all they say is heaven poop. And look at that. Here's video from the Super Bowl. They're all yelling heaven poop, heaven poop. And that's where Allahu Akbar has a context. And that's where, like, if they're going to behead a Jordanian pilot or whatever depravity ISIS did, they would say Allahu Akbar. And that's when, it had a religious connotation. But when they're basically high-fiving and going, we just shot a MFing jet down. Dude, this missile worked. Yeah. And so those are the different contexts. There was another gun crew on the ground. Interestingly enough, they had a Turkish-supplied weapon, 23 millimeter Turkish-supplied weapon. And so there's some debate about whether or not the guns got the aircraft. But it was witnessed for 20 miles around. As you can tell, these chaps are happy. Yeah. And after 5 years, they've gotten pretty good. Like in this case, so this pilot could have helped himself a little bit by flying lower, flying faster, or something. But it almost looked like a target range for these guys. Of course, they have the gun mounted in the back of a 4-door Toyota Helix pickup. And they're popping away. And of course, everybody's rolling video because they know that if something happens, they're going to get it on video. So they're wildly firing, then they're aiming. The jet comes into view right before the missile hits. Missile hits right here. And there you go. The pilot was identified by the Russian Ministry of Defense as, I believe, was Flight Lieutenant Filipov. It was like Roman Filipov, and there's one photo of him, of his corpse. And as I say, it doesn't look like there was some, that he was beaten, cut, and tortured. It looks like he died in a gunfight or he died from a self-inflicted wound. What would they do what would be the smart play? If you caught this guy alive, what would be the smart play? What would they do? Would they execute him? Or what would the smart foe do if they get a Russian pilot alive? I'll tell you what. He ejected. He safely punched out. And there's video of him under his canopy. It's a good canopy. He's coming down in a controlled fashion. And no one is shooting at him in his parachute either. Not like the Russian, the Su-20, the Russian aircraft that the Turks shot down. The one guy who lived, was captured and they rescued him on the ground. The other guy was shot by the Syrian rebels on the ground in his parachute. He hit the ground, just pouring out blood. I mean, they made a sieve out of him under his parachute, and which, by the way, is a specific war crime. And this is a weird thing, and I know we're late. It's illegal in the law of war to shoot at paratroopers coming out of a plane. If infantrymen are jumping out of a perfectly good plane, it's legal to shoot them because they are infantrymen. When they hit the ground, they're infantrymen. You can shoot them under their parachutes. However, a parachutist is someone who has left a stricken airplane. They are off limits in the law of war. You cannot shoot at a. I know, but I mean, you just shot the plane down and one guy came up, but it's a true deal that you can shoot at paratroopers. You can't shoot at parachutists. So that's how the law of and other contradictions. Don't get me started. Yeah, those aviators. We'll be back right after this. It is a dark secret place. Brian Suits in here until midnight. KFI AM 640. More stimulating talk. Michael Chappé with the news. I have to go and refresh my beverage. I think you'll understand. Okay, well, what'd I miss? No, I'm not going to Fox and Hound till later. If I make it out of Timmy Nolan's. Oh, whoops. All right. Yep, the range is hot. Sock over the doorknob. The range is hot. I repeat, the range is hot.
I think you're ready. You got a minute.
Wait, not ready yet. All right, we got it. So me and Shannon are going to try to drink each other under the table. Oh, yeah, I'm good. I'm ready.
All right.
We're going to drink each other under the table tomorrow.
That changed his mind about that.
Weekdays at 10 a.m. on KFI.
An iHeart radio station.
KFI AM 640. Not a dance party. I know you'd be confused with hits like that. Wanda Jackson from 1959. No, it's a dark secret place. Talking about a Russian aircraft shot down over Syria and the pilot dead earlier today. And Brian sits in here until midnight with your weekly look at the world melting down. We'll get to North Korea next hour in depth. A slide, an actual PowerPoint slide, evidently from a classified Russian government briefing, has been leaked or has. And these things don't happen generally accidentally. The Russians don't accidentally leak, for instance, their nuclear submarine, their suicide nuclear bomb submarine thing. That was intentionally leaked last year. And this PowerPoint slide that is being examined by American intelligence officials has the Russian take on the North Korean nuclear program. And so I'll get to that next hour. So anyway, from though in the grand scheme of things, losing one guy, one pilot, and one plane seems like a small deal. I mean, do the Russians go crazy when one of their mercenaries or one of their soldiers is killed in Syria? No, they don't. And that's part of the reason that the Russians are using private contractors in Syria, because they don't have to report the death of a guy who's working for a private company. They do lose surprisingly high-ranking people in Syria. It was interesting because a Russian general, a Ukrainian rebel general from 2 years ago, who the Russians absolutely swore was not in any way, shape, or form affiliated with the actual Russian army. He died in Syria as a Russian general about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So the Russians have found a way to sell this war to their people though they have also found a way to undersell how many actual Russians are dying in Syria by contracting out some of the fighting. So anyway, though, when they lose a plane like they did today, the Russian Duma very quickly said they were setting up a committee to determine the origin of the missile and who fired it and the whole thing. And who fired it? These guys did a taking credit video. A few hours later, they described how they fired it, how they targeted the aircraft, how they observed it flying around. They did not say where they got the missile from or how they got the missile. It's probably most likely supplied by Qatar several years ago when Qatar was very actively supporting whoever on the ground wanted to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. They were flooding the battle space with all kinds of weapons. Chinese copies of anti-aircraft missiles, Russian anti-aircraft missiles, Chinese copies of the American TOW missile, anti-tank missile. Whatever was cheap and plentiful, the Qataris were buying, and they were sending it to Syria until they were called on that by the U.S. and by others. When the Qataris discriminating, or rather lack of discrimination about who exactly they were arming became obvious, because it was Qatar who basically gave ISIS the heavy weapons that they had early on, that they could begin defeating the Iraqi army and the Syrian army. It was Qatar that supplied ISIS with anti-aircraft weapons, with artillery, with anti-tank missiles and things like that, because at the time, Qatar just thought, well, whatever, if you don't like Assad, we like you. And they weren't really seeing who ISIS were. So anyway, the presence of these missiles on the ground in Syria should not be a surprise to anybody. Did we supply them? Well, the reason probably we didn't supply them is because regardless of the damage that the Russian Air Force does, and we know, it's documented, that they're doing incendiary cluster bombs on Syrian towns. They had this campaign of bombing hospitals, because if you kill a doctor, you've killed 1,000 people. You can go around, you can try to kill 1,000 people, but wouldn't it be easier to just kill doctors? So they were bombing hospitals to either keep doctors from coming into Syria or just depopulating the country of doctors. But the United States, the Obama administration, did not want to deal with Vladimir Putin at the other end of an American-supplied anti-aircraft missile. So we did not supply most of the Free Syrian Army guys that we know of with anti-aircraft missiles. Like I say, we did supply them with TOW missiles, anti-tank missiles, and the rebels actually found a way to shoot helicopters down with them, which actually isn't hard. But we didn't want this confrontation that the Russians seem to want now. So now they're trying to put one and one together, and they're trying to blame the U.S. for that missile existing on the ground in Syria. Doesn't seem like it's going to be a direct line. It might be a dotted line or a dashed line to the U.S., but then again, American aircraft have been under the very same threat and flying in the very same skies. So that's why it's the best argument that we are not supplying anyone with anti-aircraft missiles is because they might have fallen in the hands of ISIS, and they would have been turned against American A-10s. But so far, so good. No Americans have been shot down in the Operation Inherent Resolve. The Jordanians lost an F-16. Things worked out horribly for that pilot. They put him in a cage and soaked him in gas and lit him on fire. But no American pilots or aircraft have been shot down by ISIS. Well, now ISIS is gone, but what about anyone else with a missile? And so that's the reason we probably never supplied anti-aircraft missiles to anyone on the ground, because we were going to be in the same skies, and we just didn't trust the operators and their motivation. So is there a chance now that maybe the Al-Qaeda, who still exists, in Syria, they exist in the form of the Al-Nusra Front. If you were them, wouldn't you make it priority one to get shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles? Of course you would. What's astounding to me is that between September 11th, 2001 and February 3rd, 2018, that in the entire war on terror, in this entire part of the world, the Middle East, my area of responsibility south of Baghdad was awash in anti-aircraft missiles. And not once in the past 17 years has a missile been fired at a commercial aircraft a commercial airliner anywhere in the world. So apparently, even though they exist all over the place, and if you have enough money, you can get them. We paid a $10,000 bounty for the things. And so if you're willing to pay more than that, you can have one of those missiles. The big leap seems to be getting it to Europe or the U.S. or South America or whatever. But anyway, I think it's the simplest answer, paging Dr. Occam, is that whoever finds them uses them because they tend to be where there's a conflict and you want to use them in that conflict. So anyway, today the Russians got a copy of their own missile fired back at them. The result is pilot ejects, gets on the ground, fights it out, and is killed apparently in a gunfight, or he committed suicide. So, but the Russians are pretty pissed about this because it is an embarrassment to be shot down by these guys. It's an embarrassment. That's how they're handling it. Back in a minute. It is a dark secret place. Brian sits in here until midnight. KFI AM 640. More stimulating talk. Michael Chappé with the news.
You're clear.
Weinstein, she says Weinstein forced himself on her sexually years ago in a hotel room in London. Weinstein's attorney says Weinstein admits only to making an awkward pass at Thurman, strongly denying any physical assault. Police have busted a man who was accused of holding a knife to the chest of an 8-year-old girl at a Walgreens at Echo Park.
To get Dark Secret Place on KFI, 10 years ago, Dale Dye used to do the show on Sunday afternoons. And Dale Dye went to Australia for the HBO Marine series, The Pacific, that 12-part sort of, Marine version of Band of Brothers. So Dale Dye had to leave for like 2 months. And so Robin came to me, and I was doing, 7 to 10 p.m. at that time. And she said, hey, Dale Dye did this sort of military-based show, and he's leaving. And do you want to take over that time? And I said, sure. And then we were trying to think of a name. And I said, well, I can tell war stories, right? And she said, yeah, that'd be great. And I said, okay, well, then I'm going to go to my Dark Secret Place. And so that's why we called it the Dark Secret Place. So... no, when he came back, he was a guest, and he moved along, kept doing movies and TV and his novels. But he and I are buddies. Captain Dai, I call him Dai Wee because that's Vietnamese for captain, and he calls me Nakib, which is Arabic for captain. And let me find him here. Look, he's the first D on my phone. Really good chap. I call him with different ideas and things like that, and there's a thing that I'm writing. A World War II, sort of it's aimed at cable to be like a 10-part standalone or maybe the kickoff of a 10-part, a series, but at least a 10-part thing. And I'm co-writing it with a guy who you would know more as a comedian. You would know him. He's a TV funny guy, but he also writes movies. And so he and I are writing this thing. And we're at the right time in the right town because everybody needs content right now. So Dale Dye is actually advising me on that, on how to concentrate and sit down and write and do stuff like that. He's a really good guy. And let's be honest, the guy invented his own job. He came to Hollywood, he got that voice. He's got that voice of authority. He give me great advice. If you've never seen Drunk History, by the way, my daughter watches Drunk History. Drunk History is a hilarious show, great show. And the guy who created it, Derek Waters, this is the 6 degrees of separation. You guys know that I'm friends with Lauren Sivan from Fox 11. Now she's on with Dr. Drew on KBC. Well, she's been on Drunk History, as a as a player, and she knows Derek Waters, the creator of Drunk History. And so we went out drinking once, and I told him war stories. And I said, dude, if you want to do, drunk war stories, I've got the people for you. And so that's something that we sort of thought of. So yeah, I'd love to be on Drunk History. It's a hilarious show. But yeah, Lauren is what's funny is Lauren and I, we used to meet at the Cat and Fiddle on Hollywood when that existed. Now Cat and Fiddle has moved to Highland, and we get together and start drinking and telling stories. And I wish we could record it. We're pretty funny together. But yeah, she is super funny, and she knows that her TV time, is not really her future. I wish she would get into comedy. I wish she would just jump in with both feet, and go into TV or something. But I would like to do a radio show with her. I have listened to the show that she's on, and I go way back with Dr. Drew. I don't think he's the right guy. I don't think that's the right combination for her. She is super smart and super funny, but I think Drew, is so goddamn serious. It's really hard to listen to that show. I don't know how many of you go back with me on K-Rock, but if you remember when Poor Man was fired, I filled in for Poor Man for a month on Loveline, and then I had to sleep on a couch and then produce Kevin and Bean. And I didn't really understand what a big deal Loveline was. I couldn't wait to get off of Loveline. They brought in like Ricky Rackman and all these guys, and finally settled on Adam. And Adam was part of the morning show with Kevin and Bean. And so he took over, and the thing became monster. But I liked it. I just didn't see it was not the radio I wanted to do. I look, in retrospect, I kind of wish I'd stuck with it. But I tend to look forwards when I don't walk backwards. So I wouldn't have gone to 3 wars if I cared about my radio career. Apparently. Poor Man was an idiot. It's the Avalanches, because I'm me. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here until midnight live. And next hour, meanwhile, on the other part of the horrific ball of inhumanity that Syria is, a Kurdish anti-tank crew, an all-female crew, takes out a Turkish tank. The Turks are admitting to 5 dead, and I'll play you that. So if these guys on the ground had captured this Russian pilot alive, or if they had the capability to do that, then the proper move, if you really want to troll Vladimir Putin, and you really want the world to maybe pay attention to what's happening in Syria, then you would collect all the various video from the city in the Idlib province that the Russians were bombing today, and you would catalog and note the women and children killed by this particular pilot. And because you have video of his particular strafing runs. And at the very minimum, he was in the chain of command, executing attacks on civilian areas. And then you would give the guy medical care, and you would find a way to get them out of Syria, and you would deliver them to The Hague with a thumb drive full of video and say, this is Flight Lieutenant Filipov, Roman Filipov, on the 3rd of January at approximately noon local time. He did 5 rocket runs on the city of Idlib, and he caused the death of 17 civilians, as seen here. And here are the written depositions of the citizens there and all that. And that would absolutely troll Putin. But that is not what anyone's thinking on the ground. I don't know what these guys who were trying to capture him would have done with him. But he obviously, just like I would or any rational person would, when you're on the ground there, if you've been shot down by whoever's on the ground in Syria, your assumption is going to be, I'm going to be beheaded. If I'm alive, they're going to cut my freaking head off. And I don't want to do that. So anyway, you can find on your own time the other photos from the crash site, including these guys who found the internal cannon of the aircraft. The aircraft, the reason it's similar to the American A-10 is because it has a pretty substantial cannon for anti-vehicle, anti-tank purposes. It's not as big as the A-10's cannon, but it's still a very, very effective weapon. But it's a really big 23 millimeter automatic cannon. And these guys find it in the wreckage, cut it out of the wreckage, and then all the ammo, these gigantic 30 millimeter rounds or 23 millimeter rounds, and they balance it on a motorcycle and drive off with it. And it was like the ultimate battlefield troll, as we shot your plane down and now we have the cannon. And so but we'll just wait out and see how the Russians reacted. And by the way, so punchline, the area, the city where the missile came from that shot down the Russian aircraft, within hours, right after sundown, the Russians returned and they did a punitive strike on the town. The town that shot their buddy down, when that mission got back to the Russian Air Force base at Himim in Syria on the coast, they said, we lost Filipov. He was shot down by a missile. We didn't hear him. His radio's not working, whatever. They immediately did a retaliatory strike. So they obviously knew he was dead. I mean, they had released his name before this punitive strike returned, but the Russians came back in a big way and just bombed the living S out of this town. And they made a point of, you do that, here's what you get. Here's what you brought onto yourselves, which, by the way, is also a war crime. Punitive attacks are also a war crime. But, I mean, in this day and age, who am I talking to? Whose time am I wasting by lecturing to anyone, certainly to the world about Vladimir Putin, about war crimes? So what is happening in North Korea? We are now a week away from we're 5 days away from the opening ceremonies of the Olympics. We're also, the other thing that's going to happen is that the preparations in Pyongyang are now, they can't even hide them. The North Koreans are going to put on a gigantic military parade on February 8th, apparently. This may coincide with more rocket tests because there's activity at the testing facility. So the North Koreans might have sort of a counter-Olympic opening ceremony. This at the same time as they're fielding a all-Korean, North and South, female hockey team. So on the one hand, they want to be in the opening ceremonies. South Korea has agreed to not even fly the South Korean flag at the opening ceremonies of their Olympics. They're going to fly this silly blue peninsula, unified peninsula thing that a lot of South Koreans don't like. But meanwhile, the North Koreans are responding by obviously prepping a huge military parade and some missile tests. Also, when we come back, and so next hour, this photo on the internet, apparently taken in some classified Russian government briefing, showing the Russian perspective of North Korean progress on missile and nuclear capabilities. And when we come back, the all-female Kurdish anti-tank crew that earlier today struck a Turkish tank with the death. The Turks are saying 5 soldiers, the entire crew of the tank, and they're saying more than that. So the very, very complex war in Syria coming up. And then my buddy Jim sent me a really interesting story. The Chinese possibly have caught up to us and maybe even have gone past us in super futuristic railgun technology. That and more coming up. Hour number 2 of the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here until midnight. KFI AM 640. More stimulating talk. My battery is giving me a warning.
Live on the 24-hour KFI newsroom. 2 people inside a shoe store in Compton have been hurt by a car that crashed right to the front window. Both people hit were shopping at the Shoe City store just before 6 tonight. The car made entry by at least 30 feet inside the store near Longbeach Boulevard and Rosecrans Avenue.
They are. Many are, buddy. If you know what I'm saying.
A mechanical issue. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says the president wants to solve.
So I'm going to save the battery on this. I have the one, but it's dead now.
Comments came yesterday in Mexico City where he met with his counterparts from Mexico and Canada. Tillerson says during their meetings he told Mexico
my mistake was not charging this, so I had.
So I got a question. Are you not going to be doing the pre-recorded segments?
So I got to go.